everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are going to be talking about wet and messy play, also known as sploshing. Now, for a kink that for most of the world is considered to be very weird and quite strange, there's an awful lot of media representation of this particular fetish. Of course, there is that one famous scene from the movie 9½ Weeks where they engage in food play.
Madison, keep your eyes closed, please. Just to get you down. Further. Further. Right. I'll put it right on the spot. Right on the spot. Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
And then there is this absolutely amazing scene from the TV show Better Call Saul.
What's a squat cobbler?
Squat cobbler. You know what squat cobbler is.
No, I don't know what a squat cobbler is.
No, me neither. What is it? What, you two guys are cops? Hoboken squat cobbler. Full moon pie. Boston cream splat. Seriously? Simple Simon the Ass Man. Dutch apple ass. Guys, am I not speaking English here?
What the hell is a squat cobbler?
It's when a man sits in pie. He sits in a pie. And he wiggles around.
And I wish I had a good working theory for why this specific type of play is so prevalent in media compared to a lot of other kinks. I think it's just kind of weird and funny, but today we're going to be getting down into what wham, or wet and messy play, really actually is, and what it's not, and how you can engage in it, how you can incorporate it into BDSM scenes, and some safety tips and some things to think about if you're wondering in how to engage in this type of play for yourself. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's lay down some groundwork and talk about what wet and messy play is. So wet and messy play is also known as wham, and it's also called sploshing, and it's really just about being able to make a mess. Like a lot of things that are BDSM or fetish focused, the power and the allure of this kind of play oftentimes comes from a place of subversion and transgression. I mean, from the time that we are born, most of us are raised to always be neat and prim and proper and make sure that our teeth are brushed and our hair is combed and that our clothes aren't dirty, and as soon as they get dirty, to make sure we take them off and put on some clean clothes. So for a lot of people, being able to engage in wham is about being able to subvert that, about being allowed to be messy, and it can just be fun. It can just be fun to be messy. I mean, how many of you guys dreamed about doing a food fight when you were in elementary school? And I think wham still has a lot of that same kind of food fight appeal to it. It's just nice to be able to experience interesting and new sensations, and it can be so freeing and just a new way of experiencing the world. Now, a lot of people do associate wet and messy play with food, and there's so many different types of food that people include in wham. That can be things like whipped cream or hot chocolate or caramel sauce or tomato sauce. That could be things like maraschino cherries. That could be things like pies and cakes. If it's edible, somebody has probably tried to use it for a wham scene with varying success. But food is definitely not the only way to engage in wet and messy play. A lot of people also use, or maybe even exclusively use, non-edible foods when they engage in wet and messy play. So this might be things like motor oil, or shoe polish, or shaving cream, or foam, or slime. All kinds of things that aren't edible you can use for wham. And I think this is really important to remember when you're thinking about some other fetishes that overlap with wham. I think a lot of people get wet and messy play confused with feederism or with stuffing kinks. With those types of play, the emphasis is on consuming food, and mess can be part of that. Mess can kind of heighten the experience, but the emphasis is on the consumption of food. Whereas with wham, the food tends to be more of a means to an end, and maybe if you're focusing something specifically around like a food fight or sitting in pies, it's food focused, but it's not so much on the consumption as it is on using the food as like a tool of maybe the texture or the sensation or the fact that it's kind of like messy and subversive. Now, this is also definitely not the same thing as using food for penetrative intercourse. I know for some reason that doing things like using a cucumber or a zucchini for a dildo are quite popular, but that is not what wet and messy play is. Now, that may be part of a larger wet and messy play scene, or is part of like a wham sex scene, but again, it's not really the focus, and merely using food for sex is not what most sploshing or what most wham play is going to be about. Now, I do want to just emphasize here that I am coming at this from a BDSM perspective, but for a lot of people, and also kind of like age play, a lot of times this has absolutely nothing to do with BDSM at all. It can be its own standalone fetish. It doesn't need to be part of a BDSM scene in order to actually be wham. And honestly, I think this is something that a lot of vanilla people can even be interested in as a gateway to exploring their fetishes or to maybe get into BDSM. So while in this video I have used, and I am going to continue to use, BDSM language, if you are somebody who is really into this and just likes sploshing or just likes wet and messy play for its own sake and you're not otherwise kinky, that is totally okay. I'm not trying to say this is strictly a BDSM activity, but it is one of those things where there's sort of this like Venn diagram, right? And there's this overlap between like BDSM and like wet and messy play, and there's people who do both, and there's people who do one and not the other. So hopefully that kind of makes some sense. But I do want to make sure that I talk about ways that you can use wham in your BDSM scenes and why, as a BDSM person, you might want to think about incorporating this. And there's an absolute laundry list of ways that you can include this in your BDSM play. I'm gonna go through a couple of them, but I'm sure there are ones that I'm missing here. Now, obviously one of the big ones is going to be sensation play. If you already like sensation play, why not add a little bit more mess to it? Maybe you find that you really like a feather duster. Well, what if you add a little bit of something for the feather duster to dust off? What if you're using a Wartenberg wheel, but the Wartenberg wheel is also going through maybe some foam or some slime that was put over your body? Maybe you like temperature play or wax play. I think being able to use cold foods or cold substances as part of a wham scene while layering that with other sensations can be so interesting. So for example, you could do something where maybe you're doing a wax play scene with some cold ice cream, or maybe you're using ice cubes, or maybe you've put a knife in the freezer and when you take it out, you're running it through some hot fudge that has been put over your lover's body. A lot of people also really like to incorporate this into rough body play or into wrestling play. I think this just adds kind of another level to it. I know a lot of people who like doing things like mud wrestling or lube wrestling or foam wrestling, and kind of adding the messiness to it, I think just adds another level of sort of the, this is like so hard to describe, but the kind of freeing sensation of being able to wrestle and like use your body to engage with somebody else. And I think as well, this can also fit quite well with primal play in a lot of the same ways that rough body play and wrestling does. They're definitely not a one-to-one the same thing. They overlap. If you're wondering what primal play is, link to the podcast where we talk about it down below. But maybe you're doing something where like you are engaging in primal play and maybe you and your partner are like two predators that have just found like a carcass of raw meat, even though it's really like just slightly undercooked, like rare steak or something like that, and you're like fighting over it and wrestling over it, and it gets all messy and there's like fake blood everywhere, and I don't know, get crazy with your imagination, because wham is one of those things where you are definitely allowed to get crazy with your imagination. Now, there are a lot of people who use wham as part of role play for their scenes. One of the big ones obviously is age play. Kids are messy, and especially little kids. So if you are a little who is maybe 3, 4, 5, I mean, heck, you could even be in middle. There's really no age limit on this. Maybe you're a middle schooler who's getting into a food fight. Maybe you are an infant who is trying to transition from bottle to spoon feeding. Maybe you are a brighted little girl who is refusing to eat her dinner, and rather than doing that, she is deciding to throw her spaghetti all across the wall. There's a lot of possibilities there. In that same vein, I think pet play also lends itself really well to wet and messy play. Animals don't have social niceties. They don't care about staying prim and proper. If they are going to roll in something, it's probably going to be dirty and smelly, and so that makes perfect sense. Maybe they are rolling around in mud or grass clippings. Maybe you are a pet who is a particularly messy eater. Maybe you are a pet who is refusing to take a bath and is getting chased around with like a big bucket of foam. I'm not sure. There's a lot of ways that you can incorporate wham into a pet play scene as well. Now, a lot of people also do like using it with bondage, which is really nice. Something that I really like doing is just like being tied down and like not being able to move and kind of being like almost like overpowered with all the sensations of all the different textures of everything. And finally, the last one that I think is a big one for people who enjoy wet and messy play and maybe want to either add other types of play to it, or maybe this is the reason why they like wet and messy play, is humiliation. Humiliation is a massive part of the BDSM community. It is something that is super prevalent, and if you are getting disheveled and messy, and if you're getting pie smeared in your face and you're being forced to wear clothing that has been drenched in caramel sauce, or you're having to wear in like muddy socks all day, that is probably somebody's absolute humiliation heaven right there. Because again, it's about being able to subvert things. It's about being able to go against the grain. And being messy is something that is traditionally very embarrassing and humiliating for people, you know, just out in the everyday world. And I can completely see why wet and messy play would tap into somebody's humiliation fetish. Now, before we wrap up today's video, let's just briefly discuss some basic safety things to know if you want to start in wet and messy play. Compared to a lot of things in BDSM, like even using handcuffs, wet and messy play isn't that dangerous, and I think it's actually a good way for people who are interested in kind of getting started in bedroom kink to be able to start find their footing. But there are a few little things to note. One is be very careful with sugar around the vagina. I know, it sounds really, really hot to lick chocolate off your lover's body. Just make sure that part of their body is not their vulva, because yeast infections are awful and you do not want one. On a similar note, be very, very careful with spicy food. If your play partner is a masochist, doing a wet and messy scene involving spicy foods can definitely increase the power of sensation play, but you want to be really careful around the mucous membranes. That would be the things that are downstairs, your lips. You don't want to get anything inside the ears, obviously. You should make sure to protect your eyes and make sure that you are trying to contain the spice as much as possible to the areas where you specifically want to use it. Because ain't nobody want to get ghost pepper oil in their eye, so just don't risk it, okay? Something that you can do as kind of a layer to this sort of play, but also is a good safety precaution, is consider including a gallon of cold milk if you are going to be doing something with spice. You can do things that are sort of like, you know, baking in denial play, where like you're torturing somebody with the spice level and like the gallon of cold milk is right there. And gosh, wouldn't it just be nice if they would splash your whole body with cold milk? But it's also a safety feature at the same time, so always be thinking about that kind of stuff. Now, something you want to be careful of is eggs and eggshells, because if you are throwing an egg at somebody, those little teeny shards of eggshell will become like projectile weapons if you are throwing it fast enough. So if you want to incorporate eggs into your wet and messy play scene, consider pre-cracking them and just throwing them from your hand raw, or maybe put them in a water balloon or something like that, because you really don't want to accidentally cause a bunch of scratches or get like a eggshell splinter in your arm and then like layer spice or like potentially really like infectious material into an open wound. It's just really not a good idea. Like spicy food, you should probably also be aware of food that is abrasive or is scratchy. A lot of people really like scratchy textures and sensations, but you want to be aware if you're doing something like, say, strawberries, or something that's really acidic like lemon. Make sure you're being aware of that, and make sure the person you're playing with is aware that they are going to be potentially scratchy or potentially burning. Again, nobody wants to have lemon juice going down their vulva, it's probably not very pleasant and not something I'd recommend doing unless you have specifically negotiated to do something like that. Now, the last thing I want to note in terms of safety is obviously, and I hope this is obvious, you want to be aware of anybody's allergies, food or otherwise. If they're diabetic, you may want to take that into account. If they basically have anything that would be a concern with being around food in some way, like if they have celiacs or if they have allergies, make sure you talk about that when you are negotiating for the scene. Very, very important to keep in mind to make sure that both you and your partner are having the best scene. But otherwise, this is a relatively safe form of play as long as you kind of keep those guidelines in mind. There are plenty of quick and easy ways to get started in doing this, like, you know, using ice cubes during a scene, or maybe whipped cream or chocolate, very kind of like stereotypical like Cosmopolitan magazine type suggestions. But honestly, they work and they're not a bad way of getting started if you don't want to invest in like, you know, reserving a giant open field and buying like dozens and dozens of tarps to make sure that you can do a scene involving like a 10-foot wide cake that your partner is going to sit in or something like that. So it is perfectly okay to start small, figure out if you like it, and kind of increase the intensity of the scene from there. But that's all the information I have to share with you guys today about Wham. If you guys have any comments or questions about this form of play or anything else, please let me know down in the comment section below. I'm trying to do more one-on-one style videos again, so if you have any from me that you want to see but I haven't made yet, please let me know down there as well, and I will add it to my list. If you guys want to see more from me, my social media, stuff like that, links to that and related videos will be down below. If you like this video and you haven't already, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week. And finally, if you like my channel and you want to support my work, the best place to do that is on Patreon. That is what allows me to make more videos and better videos, and it also allows me to offer exclusive content like videos and chats and photo shoots, all sorts of fun things. So if you haven't already, do check that out. And if you already support, thank you so, so much. You guys are what makes these videos possible. All right, and until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.